Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Bearded Fortech. Today I have with me again Mr. Lake Speed. It's a pleasure to have you back on the channel, sir. We're going to be going over the used. We're going to go over the used oil analysis for the synthetic blend AMSOIL. We did a virgin sample a while back. I sent some to a subscriber. I believe he was up in New York, and he went 5,000 miles on it. I do believe somewhere around in there.
Yeah, 5,012 to be exact.
And send it off for testing. And we have the results here, and we're going to go over it. Let me bring it up on the screen, and we'll have Lake go over this. And here it is. What do we have, Lake?
So this is one of the first things that kind of jumps right out is one of the classic things that we see, that when you change from, brand A or brand B or, oil A or, whatever you're doing, that first fill, you're not going to get conclusive results from just one oil change. And why I'm saying that is, one, I have experience with that, but the evidence of that is on the third result line on this report, or the second report line, which is oxidation value. And we compare his used sample at 12.6 absorbance units compared to 33.2 for the new oil. Because while the new oil you sent in was a 530 and this is a 520, the reality is the additive package, the base oil combination, they're the same. They may tweak the viscosity of the base oil in the amount of viscosity modifier, but essentially the chemistry of all those oils within the same brand and family, the chemistry is the same. So why is there this big difference in oxidation value? It's because that's how much residual oil from the previous sample or previous oil was still there, dragging it down. Because when you have an ester type oil, and that's what this is. I mean, when you have a new oxidation value, over 25, or that's going to indicate some level of a group 5 type base oil, typically an ester, which you're going to see. The AMSOIL signature series, because it's a PAO ester, there's a lot more ester in the signature series. That would normally come in using the 50 to 60 oxidation unit range. This new one, the blend, came in around 33, which we found very interesting before, right? And we mentioned last time, we were kind of like saying, that's pretty odd. And then they had that one little thing that on the SDS sheet said something about, soybean oil. And that got us all like, ooh, they're using some kind of like, bean derived oil. Because bio-derived products do fall into the group 5 category. So not all group 5s are synthetic, so we were wondering about that. Oddly enough, when I went to visit the guys at AMSOIL back in the fall, and we did the video about motorcycle oils, Alan, the president of the company, said, hey, we have an answer for you about that. We saw that. We were very curious about that as well. And turns out that one of the additives they use in that formulation, a derivative, an intermediate product in there, is a soybean oil. Is part of making that one additive. So it's a super, super small percentage, but according to the Pennsylvania SDS requirements, they had to list it. So this isn't a bio-based product. That's not where the oxidation value is coming from. I appreciate those guys giving us the straight answer on that. That was really cool. Much appreciated for full transparency there.
I didn't tell anybody about that. And when you said they saw the video, I didn't tell them about it. I didn't send it to them. I know you didn't. So that means they came across it organically, or somebody brought it to their attention.
Absolutely.
And that's really cool that the president of AMSOIL actually saw that and gave you the answer of where it came from. So that's really cool.
I thought it was super cool. I'm like, man, it's awesome. I can't wait to tell you about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So which that's good to know. Okay. So we know that this is an ester blend to create that product based on the oxidation value and that feedback. That's really cool. Right. And what we see, the number going lower like this, you typically don't see esters go lower. It can happen sometimes, but usually that's in the case where you have really short trip driving, yeah, you said New York, possibly cold weather, can do that. But what you'll normally see is that it will also, this water will usually be in the oil as well, because what happens is with an ester is a byproduct of reacting an acid with an alcohol, and then it creates water and an ester. So if you get a lot of water buildup, you can usually reverse the product, and then that will drop. But I don't really see that being the case here. And the main reason I say that is if you start looking at the additive levels, particularly the boron, that one's a little bit lower than the new oil. So that kind of leads me to think that there's some carryover between the other two. Now, that's all just kind of looking at. So, okay, we know that you changed the oil. You didn't get all the oil out. It wasn't completely clean. So the fresh one, the first one's not going to tell you everything about how the oil is doing. But the thing is, I mean, a 2.4 parts per million per 1,000 miles, that oil's doing really good. It's performing excellent. Now, if anyone's watching, you do the math real quick, you're going to say, hey, well, that's not right. If I add up all the numbers, that's more than 12. That's right. But you can see from the new oil test that 6 parts per million 10, that's not from wear. That's from the oil. So that you can't count the 10 towards the wear metals.
That's part of the additive package?
It is. So that 10 is showing up from the molybdenum. So there's a MODTC additive. And I think I mentioned that on my recent video, actually. One of my most recent ones, I talked about that there's a specific type of MODTC that when you analyze it, there's trace levels of 10 that show up when we do it. Now, I've been seeing it for years. Not every moly additive has this, but there's one specific one that does. And it's a really, really good MODTC. It's a friction modifier. It's an antioxidant. It provides anti-wearability. It does a great job. And par for the course, when AMSOIL makes an oil that's not a spec oil, right? When they go and they just do their thing, they don't do the cookie cutter API deal. They tend to use higher end components and make a top shelf product. And that's evidence of that. That's what you see right here. And those are great results.
Which is exceeding, when you say top tier product, it's exceeding what the manufacturer would recommend, correct? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that they're making their own blend here, right?
Okay.
I mentioned this one in a video I did about making motor oil. When I'm making the analogy about making cake, like you can go to the kitchen, and if you know what you're doing, you can get the flour and the eggs and the baking powder and all the different ingredients and make a cake from scratch. But you got to know what you're doing to be able to do that right. Or you can just go down to the Food Lion and buy a Betty Crocker cake mix and come back and just follow the directions and be done.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying.
If you're really good, you can make a better cake than the Betty Crocker cake. But you got to know what you're doing.
Gotcha.
The catch-22 in the specialty oil world is that the Lubrizols, Aftons, Ornite, Infinium, the major companies that make the additive packages that every brand of oil on the planet is using their additives as a base, at least. They do all the testing. What they mainly sell, what their business is selling Betty Crocker cake mix to companies that can just do blending and packaging. No knock on the private label companies out there like Warren Distribution and those kind of companies like that make millions and millions of gallons of private label oil. They don't want to do any kind of research. They're not doing any kind of, we'll call it performance testing. They do QC testing,
Right.
They don't do performance testing. So what they're doing is they're buying these cake mix packages, if you will, from Lubrizol or Afton, Ornite, Infinium that meet the spec. Whatever that API or OEM requirement is, they make it. They can follow the recipe and make the oil that meets the spec. And as we've shown in some of the videos on my channel, hey, they do a good job. I mean, their C's get degrees or maybe even B+ students in some cases, depending upon which one you're using. But where the specialty companies come in we'll call it the unlicensed products, the products that don't have the API donut on it or the formal approval from the OEMs, what can happen, that's like the person making the cake at home from scratch. You can get something better than what you can buy at the grocery store, but you can also get stuff that's worse. And you just don't know, right? And as I've mentioned before, just saying you have better ingredients is like saying, well, that restaurant's the best because they buy all the best vegetables and the best beef and all that. Okay, well, that's a great start. But if the guy cooking it or the gal cooking it doesn't know what they're doing, it's not going to taste good.
I see what you're saying.
You got to have, to be the very best, you got to have Gordon Ramsay back there cooking with the really good ingredients. You got to have that combination. And that's where I think a lot of people misunderstand. I mean, literally today, I was looking at a sample. And I've seen a couple samples now from the same oil, from the same customer. And this is a specialty oil that's got all the high-end ingredients in it. But at 7,000 miles, it's oxidized. Viscosity has gone up. Oxidation's up. This is a PAO ester blend. So it's gone up. And the wear rate's up. And then they shortened the oil drain interval. And it's gotten better, but it's still up. Even at 5,000 miles, this oil is basically dead.
Wow. So
you can, just because you use great ingredients, if you don't have the right combination, it not necessarily going to work. Me, I would choose this AMSOIL Sin blend over that oil every single time. It's doing way better in 5,000 miles than the other guy's oil did in 5,000 miles. And I bet this is half the money of what.
Oh, yeah. I think it was like $4-5 a quart, something like that for the synthetic blend. $5.50 a quart, maybe.
That's great. I mean, that's just really, really great pricing. I mean, that's as what's great about that oil too, right? Is you can tell. I mean, I'm actually kind of a fan of semi-synthetics. It's like closet disclosure here. The only downside to PAOs, I actually have two downsides. One is solvency. So anytime you have a PAO, you got to have some kind of co-base stock in it. So you either got to bring in a group 3, which you usually got to bring a lot of group 3 with a PAO if you're going to get the solvency for the additives to keep everything, dissolved properly and dispersed properly in the oil. People typically use, say, an ester, maybe sometimes an alkylated naphthalene, some kind of group 5 type base oil, typically to do that. And there's a lot of different types of esters. So people don't realize that just so you say ester, that's not one chemical. Right. That's like saying humans. There's a lot of difference in humans, right? So a lot of variation when it comes to esters. That other downside to PAO, besides the need for a co-base stock, is it's called pressure viscosity coefficient. So when the oil's films are really thin, say, think about a needle bearing rolling over the lobe of the camshaft, right? At high pressure, that contact pressure is so high where a straight mineral oil, like a group 1, will just turn solid. Well, that's not good because now it can't conduct heat, right? It's not flowing.
Right.
A straight PAO will increase viscosity very much. It'll increase a little bit and then basically just flatlines. So the higher the pressure goes, it's not increasing viscosity. So back to our Strybeck curve, viscosity times speed divided by load, our film's getting thinner and thinner and thinner as that's happening.
Yeah.
A
Interesting.
blend, a blend actually acts a little more linear. I mean, not all of them do, right? But they tend to be a little more linear with that pressure viscosity coefficient versus not enough or too much thickening. So we've seen this for a long time with the race stuff. You guys get, say, big block Chevy, roller cam, and they typically over valve spring the thing to keep stuff from flying apart.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you will typically get better results out of a synthetic blend because of that pressure viscosity coefficient. That being said, right before anyone just runs off and says, I'm just going to stop using synthetic and just go to semi-synthetic, just know that it is possible to actually make a full synthetic with a higher pressure viscosity coefficient. It's just really, really tough to do that because most synthetic base stocks or the group 4s don't have that. So you're not going to get it from the PAO. So you're going to be in the group 5 category now, and you're going to find something that can play well with everything else and has that. So it's really, really difficult to do that, which is why most people just don't. So it's way easier to make an oil that has that higher pressure viscosity coefficient from a blend. So back to what I always say is, don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody else. Don't try to, you can try to figure it out. But at the end of the day, listen to the data. Yeah. What does your engine say? If the used oil analysis says, hey, that syn blend is working better for my engine than the full synthetic, believe it and give it what it wants. If it says the full synthetic works better than the blend, believe it, give it what it wants. The engines don't read labels. They don't care about brand names. They only care about the chemistry. And because all engines are not the same, guess what? They're going to have different appetites.
There's one guy that likes to troll in my comments. I'm not going to mention his name, but he likes to say, and it's usually on the oil analysis videos that we do. So I don't know if he's a mutual subscriber between us, but he likes to say, you don't need an oil analysis report. Just change your oil every 3,000 miles. You'll never have a problem. And I can't wrap my head around how wrong he is. Like,
I mean, some people, that's what their thought process is. I'm just going to spend the money and spend my time, because that's what you're doing. When you change oil at 3,000 miles, you're spending time and money to avoid having knowledge.
And I don't know if that came out the wrong way. So if it did, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to say that he is wrong. He may be right in some aspect, but the whole point of the used oil analysis is not just to see how much oil life is left, but it's also to see what is going on inside of your engine. Like you just said, you need to see if it's working. And that's what the whole point of this is. And he could not wrap his head around that. And I'm like, okay, dude, you're right. I'm wrong. 1 + 1 is 27. Cool. You win.
I mean, yeah, you can't argue with it. Some people just not worth arguing with, right? Some people just like to argue, right? And but the reality is, you're not gonna find a leaky injector that way, in at least early on. I mean, perfect example. I had a guy this week that had sent in a sample probably 2 weeks ago, and it rebuilt the engine. And it had a machine shop do all the work. He put it back together himself, and engine was running. I mean, to his, from his perspective, I mean, it sounded great. Everything was fine. No obvious issues. He sent in a sample of the oil, and the bearing material was really high, like on break-ins, always going to be higher, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I even said, okay, I'll show you some examples. Like, so normal bearing wear on break-in, you expect it, the lead maybe to be 20, 30 parts per million, which is not great. But when you're talking about, not a non-OEM production built engine, that's going to be pretty typical for what most machine shops are going to do in terms of surface finish and stuff like that. And you just know it's going to happen. This gas is like over 100. I'm like, you got bearing wear. Unless you put leaded fuel in it. He's like, no, I didn't. I said, you got bearing wear. Your copper's like 200. It was like really high. He tore the engine apart, sent me pictures this week. And he's so thankful because he said, I wouldn't, if I hadn't sent this sample in, I'd kept on driving it. And he had 3 rod bearings already, past the overlay into the copper, and the thrust bearing was about gone.
Uncle Rodney would have been escaping pretty soon.
Absolutely. So, and I'll tell you right now, if someone says, well, this oil analysis costs too much money, blah, 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 and all that, save one engine, it'll pay for a lifetime of oil analysis. Mm-hmm. And that's not even figuring up the fact that if you actually dial in your oil change interval and optimize it, you will pay yourself back for the lifetime of the vehicle, mm-hmm. for the little bit of time you spent sorting it out on the front end. Yeah, it might cost you several $100s on the front side to figure it out. But once you figure it out, that savings will move forward and pay for itself in the long run easily.
Yeah. So, and see, that's like when I was testing the XL series. Right now I'm testing the Signature series, but I spent my money and bought the test kit from you, mm-hmm. sent it into you, and we did a trend analysis. And I think, what is it, like 10,000 miles was where it was starting to oxidize. So that was my limit.
Yeah.
You said take it to 12, but I was like, nah, we already know it can go there. Let's test the Signature series now. So that's what I'm doing now.
And see how much further it can go. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now I'm doing the Signature series. I think I got about another 3,000 miles to go for 5,000 miles, and I'll be sending that in. So people were like, yeah, you're just getting free oil analysis kits. No, I'm not. I'm spending my money. And some people think this is set up. It's not. This is real world stuff. So
because we both care about it, right? I mean,
exactly.
I was telling somebody the other day, a business that I wanted to be in. The origin story came from the fact that, at Gibbs, Joe Gibbs Racing, Lubrizol had been doing all this stuff for us for years. And it was great, because we just send them samples and they send us back all the stuff, and they would tell us all the great stuff. And it was, it was really cool. But then, they got bought by Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, and they started, on what they valued. And then they ended up basically cutting off that service. And we tried for, I'm going to say, a year or 2 years. We jumped around, tried a whole bunch of different labs to see if we could find someone that could do the same level of work that we got from Lubrizol. And we never could. We'd see stuff like, sometimes it'd be like something really obviously wrong. And then they would send it to us. And we're like, man, people make mistakes, right? And so sometimes you can overlook something. I make mistakes. Mm-hmm. But when it happens, 4, 5, 6 times in a 6-month period, you're like, not too sure about that. And then you see other, interpretations and guidance that's like, I'm glad I know better than to do that, because that would be a really bad idea to do what they just said to do. That's just kind of wrong, for what we're doing. And I realized that there's a lot of places that can test oil and can provide you data. There's not a lot of places that have real experience with engines and oil chemistry that can give you some guidance as well as just throwing you back some data.
Right. And
that's where, this,
that's how this one came along, because we did the virgin sample. You still there? You still there?
Yeah. The things was kind of buffering for a second there.
Okay. Yeah, you're frozen a little bit, but so we did the video on the virgin sample, and then one of the subscribers commented like, "Hey, I'll try it." So I said, "Okay." I got his information, and I paid for and sent him the 5W20 oil for his truck. And I said, "Well, the stipulation to this, I'll pay for the oil, send it to you. You pay for the testing and send it off, and then we'll go from there." So this is actually a real world. This was not set up. This is actually somebody who lives many states away from us in a totally different climate than we live in. And I thought that would be really cool, because it was wintertime too.
No, it is.
Yeah.
Well, that would be cool too, to see, okay, what does the next one look like?
Yeah.
Go 5,000 miles again in a little bit warmer weather, and let's see what happens with that oxidation value. Yeah, that would be really interesting to see, because this is the kind of stuff that again, we both care about, right? We're interested about this stuff. We want to do a good job and help people out and give them data they can trust, as opposed to just speculation.
So chromium piston ring wear, that's
yep.
What else? Aluminum. The piston skirt wear.
Yep, skirt wear. Yeah. Yep. And the reality is this: when you look at one of these reports, and every number in terms of wear is single digits, it just means it's some number less than 10. Like, and you could run that same sample 3 times, that number is going to vary a little bit. Like that 8 might be a 9 the next time, or a 7. It's going to move around a little bit. It won't go from 8 to 2, right? Gotcha. But it'll move around there a little bit. Kind of like the 6 and the 5 on the 10, same number, right? It's so the chromium, it might be 0. You run it again, right? It's basically trace tiny bits. And aluminum, yeah, it could be 2, it could be 4. It's just it's that super, super small. When I'm looking at these things, I'm saying I want to see the total parts per million per 1,000 miles, 5 ppm or less, right? If it's 5 or less, man, you're good. Yeah, that's exactly where you're at with this.
Yeah, and his fuel dilution was really low. It's under, what, 2?
Under 2. It's funny too, at this time of year, coming out of the wintertime, everything is higher right now. Like all the samples that we're getting, especially from, above the Mason-Dixon line, so I'd say from, North Carolina, Tennessee, north, everything has, probably 0.5% or more higher fuel dilution than the historical averages have been on those same units, just due to the weather.
I kind of figured the cold weather would have something to do with that.
It does. You see it, that it will go up in the wintertime, then it'll go back down in the summertime. We only see that on the cars that are daily drivers. The garage queens that only get driven in nice weather, you never see that variation. So they don't get driven in the winter.
So I don't know. I forgot what kind of vehicle it was that he had, and I don't remember how many miles it had on it.
520 is probably a Ford.
Yeah, it was a Ford. I do know that, but I don't remember what it was. I'll have to go back through my emails and look, and I don't remember how many miles were exactly on it. But I can actually go back to the AMSOIL and look what I ordered it for. But yeah, that all looks really good to me.
No, I said it's the trend analysis is going to tell us more, right? As he gets more time on it, then we'll be able to see. All right, was that oxidation? Was that really due to the dilution from the previous oil, or was that the cold weather, attacking the ester in there and knocking it down? So that's where it's great to have 2 points of data. When we get 3, it'll become a little more clear. When we get to 4, it'll get really clear. Like you really begin to know a lot of stuff, Because right now we're kind of having to speculate a little bit. We're looking at these things and we're kind of reading the tea leaves a little bit because we only have a couple points of data. But as you start going forward and you build that trend analysis, you stop guessing and you start knowing.
But those couple of points of data that we do have is better than no data at all. So
absolutely.
I would rather look at that all day than somebody tell me that that's garbage. You can't use that. You know what I mean? So that's what the data is for.
I mean, that's exactly what. Yeah, I mean, my point of view on this thing is right in line with yours. If you are going to even have a conversation about this topic, if you're not measuring it, then you don't know. So don't even talk about it.
Exactly.
I mean, it's literally not even worth discussing if you don't have data.
And that's what it's for. Like I said, it's not just to see how far you can go on your oil.
No.
It's to see what else is going on as well.
Right.
And he's got no water in there. He's got no glycol in there.
No, everything's great. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and we see too, just, you know, one of the things that kind of pops up on higher mileage cars, if people haven't been doing, you know, maintenance on their cooling system properly, we're seeing some head gasket leaks. Mm. And what's really interesting is it's basically corrosion of the head gasket, you know, from the Oats style coolant that everyone uses now. And you start to see the potassium and the sodium kick up. And it's so minor that you won't see water or glycol initially. You just see a steady build of potassium and sodium because it's leaking straight into the cylinder head or into the combustion chamber.
Right.
And there's so little water, so little glycol getting in, it just burns it all off. So it never gets in the oil enough to be detected in the oil. But the additives, the sodium, potassium, they hang around and you can see that.
Which is why I flush my coolant or do my coolant drain and fills about every 40 to 50,000 miles. So
yeah, it's really smart.
Yeah. It's not because I'm saying it's bad. It's just because I've seen what happens when you don't do these services, and I'd rather be ahead of it. So
yeah, the idea of fill for life means life's not very long. I saw some fill for life ATF the other day. Woo, it was bad. It was only like 70,000 miles, and it was horrible.
Filled for life, right? Yeah, you know what that means? If you read the fine print, it's filled for the lifetime of the warranty.
Ah.
Yeah. It's lifetime of the warranty. It's not lifetime fluid.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no lifetime fluids.
Yeah, I was gonna say, no such thing.
No, yeah.
That's a sales tactic.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it. I think about the only lifetime oil I think that would never degrade is it's called a PFPE. It's like polyfluor, whatever. I can't even say it, right? It's hard to say. But essentially, it's they develop for like space shuttle and stuff. Huh. It's not a hydrocarbon. It's you substitute the hydrogen atoms for fluorine. And so it's completely inert. You can't put anything in it. It won't take any kind of additives or nothing. But its volatility is zero. You can put it in a pure vacuum space and it will not evaporate.
Huh.
Oh, and it's stupid expensive. We did a project with Oak Ridge National Lab and we had to buy some for them from Dow. And I want to say we got 4 gallons and it was $8,000.
What?
Yep.
4.
And that's technically a group 5, but you could not use that for anything.
$8,000 for 4 gallons?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Man.
People think motor oil is expensive.
Man, I thought the stuff that goes in for our suspension, the liquid spring suspension on my fleet vehicles, it's like $84 or something a quart.
That's
Like,
bargain price compared to this stuff.
yeah, you can't go buy it on a shelf over at O'Reilly's or whatever. It's like their own special design. I'm gonna have to send you a sample of it.
Now, I've got some of this. I still have some of the PFP stuff because we made some blends to make some engine oils, and I'm probably gonna make a video about that one day. Just break it out just for fun.
$8,000 for 4 gallons?
Yeah, and that was 8-9 years ago. We did that. Who knows what it costs now?
That's an $8,000 oil change, man.
Oh yeah.
Wow. All right. Do you have anything else for us?
Nah, man, this is fantastic. This is cool. So thank you for organizing this. This is great.
Yeah.
It's cool to be able to see what's happening real world on a brand new product. It hits the market. Let's look at it. Let's get it in the field. Let's find out what's going on. Get some feedback right off the bat so we can give people guidance about it. This is great. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. Ronald Robbins, if you're seeing this video, I apologize about it taking so long to get this video out. Lake's a very busy person. I'm a very busy person. We have to let each other's schedules align. And
yeah.
So we were actually able to get to terms and make it happen. But I really appreciate everybody watching. Lake, you have anything else for anybody?
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate all the support. Everybody comments, your videos, my videos, people that care about this stuff. Thank you for showing up and being a part of the community and contributing. We appreciate it.
If you don't know Lake's channel, it's the Motor Oil Geek. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Oh, there it is behind him as well. As always, I love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.